period. Chief Constable of Thames Valley Police, Sarah Thornton, has told LBC some officers appear to have acted incorrectly.
We have referred it to the Independent Police Complaints Commission, and we will work with them to see if there are any individual acts of misconduct. And if there are, then we will deal with them robustly.
LBC has learned that the Independent Police Complaints Commission is to investigate allegations of corruption and negligence in the case of murdered Vishal Mehrotra. The 8-year-old's body was discovered in Sussex after he went missing in London in 1981. His father, Vishamba, believes police covered up his son's alleged abduction by members of a Westminster paedophile ring. He's told LBC he welcomes the developments.
They seem to be interested in taking a statement to cover each and every point that I had raised in that statement with regard to my doubts as to why certain things had not been done properly during those days.
Detectives investigating the disappearance of teenager Becky Watts have been given an extra 24 hours to question 2 people on suspicion of murder. The 16-year-old's family say they're devastated after body parts were discovered at a home in Bristol. The teenager hasn't been seen for nearly a fortnight. The Israeli Prime Minister has used a speech to the US Congress to warn that Iran poses a threat to the entire world. Benjamin Netanyahu was invited to speak by Republicans and not by the White House, which is trying to pursue a deal with Iran over nuclear weapons. He's warned of the danger he believes is posed by Iran.
Iran's Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, spews the oldest hatred of anti-Semitism with the newest technology. He tweets that Israel must be annihilated.
The Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt has apologised on behalf of the government and NHS to the families of those who died as a result of failures at a maternity unit. A report has found the deaths of 11 babies and a mother at Furness General Hospital in Cumbria between 2004 and 2013 were avoidable. A 36-year-old woman has appeared in court charged with murdering a man and a 4-year-old girl in West London. Their bodies were found at a flat in Notting Hill last Friday. The woman is expected to appear at the Old Bailey on Thursday. Rolf Harris has been stripped of the CBE awarded to him by the Queen. It comes after the former entertainer was jailed for nearly 6 years for a string of sex attacks on girls as young as 7. Sir Simon Rattle says joining the London Symphony Orchestra as music director is like coming home. He'll join in September 2017. He's insisted his move is not contingent on a new concert hall being built in London, which has already received backing from the Chancellor and the Mayor of London. The FTSE 100 has closed down 51 points at 68.89, and LBC weather largely dry with clear spells tonight for London and the southeast. A frost in places by the morning, lows of 3 Celsius. Showers continuing for parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and northwest England, but mostly dry elsewhere. Tomorrow most places dry and sunny, feeling less cold too, highs of 10 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Simon Conway.
I'm Amy Solomon in the LBC Travel Centre. Major problems through East London this afternoon. The A13 is still down to 1 lane eastbound. It's just after the Beckton roundabout, all because of an accident that happened at around 1 this afternoon. Now, this is causing major problems for anyone heading east along the A13 and Barking Road from the Canning Town flyover, the A12 from Bromley by Bow, the North Circular southbound from the Redbridge roundabout, in Wapping on the highway and along Upper Thames Street as well from the Blackfriars underpass. The M25, that's queuing anti-clockwise from junction 14 at Heathrow Terminal 4 to 11 at Chertsey after an accident. Westbound on the M27 in Hampshire, I can still see these queues from the A27 to junction 12 at Portsmouth after a breakdown. And in Leicestershire on the M1 heading south, the inside lane of 3 still blocked between 22 at Colville and 21A at Leicester North. That's because of a breakdown, so it's very, very slow past the scene. Keeping you moving, your next travel update is in 15 minutes.
LBC Travel
with GoToMeeting, pointing you to a better work-life balance.
If you're a mummy or a daddy and you smoke in the car, you probably don't know that over 80% of cigarette smoke is invisible. That means that even if you smoke out of the car window, smoke could be blowing back in and dangerous chemicals could still be getting into my lungs. Nasty stuff like carbon monoxide, arsenic and cyanide. If you could see all the poisons in your car, you wouldn't smoke.
Search Smoke Free for free support.
This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale at Drive. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Iain Dale at Drive on LBC.
Hello, a very good evening. Great to have you with us this evening. I'm Iain Dale at Drive, leading Britain's conversation every weekday between 4 and 8 here on LBC. Government Chief Whip Michael Gove enjoyed himself so much the last time he did a phone-in. He's come back to do another one. He's here with us for the next hour, taking your calls. The number to call if you have a question for him is 0345 6060973. There are so many issues that you could talk to him about. You might want to ask him about Benjamin Netanyahu's speech to Congress. Why is Israel so afraid of Iran? We will be covering that after 6. Defence spending. Jihadi John. What about those immigration figures that came out last week? Oh, and by the way, there's an election in 65 days' time. As if you had forgotten. 6 minutes past 5. Michael Gove, welcome back.
Hi, Ian. Hi, lovely to see you.
I should say that we are being filmed in glorious HD on the LBC website, so if you want to watch us live, you can do so. lbc.co.uk is where you need to go. Lots of calls already coming in. 0345 6060973 if you'd like to ask Michael a question. Before we get started, I've got to ask you about the election debates, because the first one is due to take place on the 2nd of April, and yet there's still no agreement on format or participation, as I understand it.
I don't think there is agreement yet. I mean, the broadcasters have come up with various different suggestions, but they can't get agreement across the parties. And part of the issue is that they originally defined UKIP as a minor party that deserved to be included in the debates, and that, of course, upset the Greens, not least because, as we know, they've been enjoying additional popularity over the course of the last few months. So if you include the Greens, then there are other parties, including the DUP, and the Scottish National Party, which legitimately say, well, hold on a moment, they've only got one MP, we've got more MPs, we should be included too. So it's part of the peril of, I think, with the broadcasters, thinking that they can automatically dictate to independent political parties what the shape of a debate would be, without necessarily thinking through all of the ramifications.
Why not just have 1, 2 or 3 debates with Ed Miliband and David Cameron? They're the only 2 realistic prime ministers, aren't they?
Well, you're absolutely right that even though there are a plethora of parties from which to choose, there can only be 2 choices for prime minister. It is either David Cameron or Ed Miliband. 2 things I'd say. You see them debate every week at Prime Minister's Question Time. The other thing that I would say is...
Not really a debate, is it?
Well, it's certainly one of the most watched half hours of politics in Britain every week. Secondly, I think it's the case that while I know the Prime Minister is very keen to make sure that there can be a face-off between him and the leader of the opposition, you've got to make sure, in a democracy, particularly with the broadcasting controls that we have, that every party that has a right to be represented, a right to have its voice heard, and its leader have their moment, has that. So you can't have one without the other. You can't detach a debate between the 2 alternative prime ministers, or the real prime minister and the pretender, from the obligation to make sure that other parties have their moment too.
Right, let's go to our first call. It's James, who's in Regent's Park. What would you like to ask Michael Gove?
I'd like to ask Michael 2 questions. Firstly, does he think the British Army is properly funded? And secondly, does he think the military threat is greater from Iran and ISIS than from Moscow?
Well, James, I think there are 2 very good questions there. I do think that the army are properly funded at the moment. I think that we've got the 5th highest defence expenditure, I think, of any nation in the world. And I think it is the case that while there are 1 or 2 retired service chiefs who'd like to make sure that there's some sort of commitment that's made about future expenditure, nevertheless, the current service chiefs do say that they have what it takes in order to do the job. And we've got an army of 82,000 strong. That means that we can get, in technical terms, a division, which is a pretty powerful body of men, in any theatre where we need to defend our interests.
But the American Chief of Staff,
yes.
What was his name?
Raymond Odierno.
That's the one. Well done.
Started for 10.
You passed the test. He fears, though, that in future that might not be the case. We could only have a brigade within an American division.
Yes, there was that speculation, but I don't think there's any risk, actually, if we have a Conservative government, of that happening. because it's only David Cameron, I think, of all the party leaders, who's committed to keeping the size of the army at 82,000 men and women. And if you keep the army at that level, then you can be pretty certain that you can deliver a division.
He has actually cut it from over 100,000, hasn't he?
It is. The army is smaller. Yes, but it's also the case that we're still capable of projecting the strength that we need to, that division. It's certainly the case that under David Cameron's leadership, the army is not going to be reduced any further. It is also the case that the defence chiefs would confirm that the army's capacity, and indeed the Navy and the Air Force's capacity, to project force, to defend Britain's interests, is everything that it needs to be. James also asked the question about the threat from Iran, the threat from Islamic State, and the threat from Russia. And the fact that he could list three, and others might have mentioned one or two other dangers as well that we face, emphasises the need to have a leader on the world stage like David Cameron, who is respected, and to have the commitment that we've given on the size of the army that David stands by.
What about this speech that Benjamin Netanyahu has just given in America, which was, quite a rude speech to Barack Obama? It almost humiliated Barack Obama and concentrated on the threat from Iran. Now, America and indeed Britain want to improve relations with Iran. Netanyahu thinks that's a mad policy. Which side do you fall down on?
Well, I think that Netanyahu makes the point that you need to get a good deal with Iran. He made the point that some people present it, not the British government, I should say, as a choice between a deal, any deal, and war. And Netanyahu said, no, this is a negotiation. I didn't see all of his speech, just followed some of it. In a negotiation, you've got to be tough in order to get the best possible deal. I think the other thing to say about the Israeli Prime Minister is that he was invited by Congress, and it's one of the features of American politics that, yes, there's a president and he is the commander-in-chief, and it's good that we have a very strong relationship head of government to head of state, but it is also the case that America, like Israel, like Britain, is a lively democracy, and we should have debates about precisely where the balance lies when it comes to dealing with a country like Iran, which is not a healthy democracy. It is a country that has been trying to acquire a nuclear weapon in the past. We've applied sanctions, partly because of sanctions. They're now at the table, and that proves that if you hang tough, then you can get people to the table and then potentially get a deal that works.
How much can Britain trust Iran? How much do you trust Iran in these talks?
Well, I think we have to test the bona fides of the Iranian leadership. There's a lot of pressure from below. The Iranian people have suffered as a result of the mistakes that their leaders have made. Their leaders know that, and I would hope that we would be able to ensure that we get a deal whereby Iran says that it's not going to pursue nuclear weapons, but we can also get verification. One of the other really important things about any deal is that we have the means, whether it's inspectors on the ground or the International Atomic Energy Authority, whoever it might be, making sure that promises are kept, not least because Iran's people deserve a better future. And it would be great if the Iranian leadership, instead of trying to pursue a nuclear weapon, were trying to make sure that people in Iran enjoy a higher quality of life.
You're listening to Michael Gove here on LBC. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to ask him a question. He's here with me until 6. You can watch us at lbc.co.uk. That's right there. David is in High Wycombe. Hello, David.
Good afternoon, gentlemen.
What would you like to ask?
Mr. Gove, I was just wondering, given the fact that the current government failed to hit the immigration targets set out by yourselves, I was just wondering, you're obviously going to go back to the drawing board on this. What is the number of immigration to try and cap you're looking at, or you're looking to present to everyone? Obviously, you didn't meet the last target. You want to look for something a bit more realistic. So what number are you going to be thinking of this time round?
I think that the Prime Minister and Theresa May have been absolutely right to say that we do need to get these numbers down, and that the changes that Theresa has introduced, and that hopefully we'll have a mandate to introduce after the next election, will get those numbers down.
But they haven't done so far, have they? I mean, this is the highest number since 2007.
Theresa made the point in an interview with The Times today that if we hadn't taken the steps that she's taken, the numbers would be even higher, and that's undoubtedly true. And earlier on in this Parliament, there were people who were criticising Theresa for being too tough when it came to dealing with the numbers that we have. We've got to be conscious of the fact that one of the factors driving migration up is that in the rest of Europe, most of the rest of Europe, not all countries, jobs aren't being created at anything like the same level as they're being created in Britain. We've created more jobs in this country than they have in the entire European Union over the course of the last 5 years. And therefore, you will get people from Italy and from Spain and other European countries wanting to come here to work.
You're making that argument now, but you weren't making it 6 months ago or a year ago, and I think you could have convinced people of that. But there is a split around the cabinet table, isn't there, on this? There are some of you, and I don't know which side you're on this, some of you think that you should reiterate the cap of tens of thousands at the next election, even though, frankly, no one's going to believe it. And there are others, like Eric Pickles, I think, is one of them, who says, well, what's the point? We failed in this. Let's not deceive the British people again.
Yes, there is a split around the cabinet table. I can confirm, Ian, it's between the Conservatives on the one side and the Liberal Democrats on the other.
And you can't get away with that, because it is quite clear. You've read the reports as well as I have, not just in the Times, but from other sources as well. Some of you want to reiterate the cap in the manifesto, and others of you don't. Which side are you on?
I think we absolutely do need to say that we're going to have a policy that Theresa and the Prime Minister have outlined of aiming to have a reduction down to tens of thousands, not hundreds of thousands. We need to have immigration brought back into balance.
An aim or a promise? Because last time it was a promise last time, and you've broken it. So how can you go back to the electorate and say we're going to promise you this, even though we haven't delivered it this time?
Can anyone say that there are things that Theresa has done in order to reduce immigration into this country, which were wrong? Are the things that she should have done that she hasn't?
Well, maybe reintroduce border controls before now.
Well, we do have effective border controls. That's one of the things.
They're being introduced in the next few weeks. Why didn't you do that at the beginning?
Well, there are a number of things that Theresa's...
Exit controls.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, there are a number of things that Theresa's done, but there are some of which were introduced relatively early on, some of which have been fought tenaciously through the coalition to introduce. But it hasn't been the case that anyone is saying that there is a big thing that is either not being done or not on the agenda. There are some changes that we want to make to our relationship with the European Union. The Prime Minister spelt them out in a speech just before Christmas. And I don't think anyone has said, certainly no one in any of the mainstream parties, that the Prime Minister or Theresa aren't being sufficiently tenacious.
But you're very clear. You want to see the cap in the next Conservative manifesto.
Yes.
More than 45 minutes to go to talk to Michael Gove. 0345 6060 973. This is LBC. It's 17 minutes past 5. News headlines with Simon Conway.
David Cameron says too many people and organisations have been walking on by and failing to tackle child sexual abuse. He's announced a series of new measures to tackle the problem. Police in Bristol investigating the disappearance of teenager Becky Watts have been given an extra 24 hours to question 2 people on suspicion of her murder. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has used a speech to the US Congress to warn that Iran poses a threat to his country and the entire world. This is LBC. Your travel news is next.
When we first opened in 1971, this was #1 in the charts. So if you're looking for cheap deals, get down to your local QuickFit, where MOTs are only £35. QuickFit, it's all about our spring deals. Terms and conditions apply. Offer subject to availability. Not available online.
I'm Amy Solomon in the LBC Travel Centre. Major problems continue this afternoon in East London. The A13 still has one of these 3 lanes closed eastbound. It's just after the Beckton roundabout in Barking after an accident. It happened about 1 this afternoon and it's causing major problems for anyone heading east tonight. The A13 and Barking Road are really slow from the Canning Town flyover. The A12 is slow from Bromley by Bow to Gants Hill. North Circular southbound from Charlie Brown's at the M11. In Wapping on the highway and along Upper Thames Street from the Blackfriars underpass suffering. M25, that's queuing anti-clockwise from junction 14 at Heathrow Terminal 4 to 11 at Chertsey after an accident. Westbound on the M27 in Hampshire, you've got these queues after a breakdown around junction 12 at Portsmouth, and southbound on the M1 in Leicestershire still very slow because of a breakdown between junction 22 at the A50, that's Colville, to 21A at Leicester North. Keeping you moving, your next travel update is in 15 minutes.
This is LBC.
118434, the handy number for handy numbers.
Calls cost 76p plus £1.53 per minute from a BT landline. Other networks vary and mobiles cost considerably more.
To the wheelbarrow race winners and the Sunday League smashers, the chainsaw juggling champions and the sword scoffing masters, to the triathletes, the mathletes, to all of our fellow number ones, we say, boom! You did it, and so did we.
O2 has been ranked #1 network for customer service satisfaction by Ofcom for the 6th time in a row. O2, be more dog.
The power to switch energy supplier is in your hands. It's now easier than ever to switch and save. Many could save around £200, some even more.
I saved £170.
I saved £200.
We saved £230.
Millions have already switched. Don't miss out. Start today at beanenergyshopper.com. Brought to you by UK Government. £200 saving based on median household consumption for both gas and electricity. Details at gov.uk/switching evidence.
When patients come to us for help, many of them have been living with painful, disfigured teeth for years. But our treatment could give you a full set of beautiful fixed teeth restored in just a matter of hours. I'm Dr. Michael Zibbets from TDC Implant Centre, and our new innovative procedure could help you even if your regular dentist has told you nothing can be done. So see smileinaday.co.uk or call TDC Harley Street on 0203 7334 986.
They say great drama stays with you. Well, join Sky TV online today and you'll get a free Samsung Galaxy Tab 4. So you can watch the best drama from the UK and US on Sky Atlantic, wherever you are. Including Game of Thrones, Season 5. But hurry, this offer ends 5th of March. Just thought I'd add a bit more drama there so you wouldn't forget. Search Sky Bundles to join online today. Sky. Believe in better.
Sky TV from £21.50 per month. Direct debit subject to status. £10 standard setup. Upfront payment required. Sky Go requires 3G, 4G or Wi-Fi. UK and ROI only. Minimum contract and further terms apply.
Iain Dale at Drive on LBC.
21 minutes past 5 here on LBC. Michael Gove, the Government Chief Whip, is with us taking your calls. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to put a question to him. We've got an email here. You can, of course, email ian@lbc.co.uk and you can watch us at lbc.co.uk. Richard says, it appears that the Boots boss's criticism of Labour is now more than justified, with David Lammy's comments that thieves who target wealthy department stores should get lighter sentences than if they steal from a corner shop. Does Michael Gove think that this shows Labour reverting to form in its fundamental desire to undermine wealth generation in this country? Bit of a soft one, that.
Yes. Actually, I was very surprised that it was David Lammy who came up with this suggestion. I think he's one of the most sensible Labour MPs. He knows what it's like to have constituents be on the receiving end of crime and violent crime, because he's the MP for Tottenham. It was at the heart of the riots in 2011. I remember being in the House of Commons when he spoke in the emergency debate that we had after those riots, and I remember thinking that he spoke from the heart and very powerfully. And he's not one of those softies that you sometimes get on the Labour benches who makes excuses for criminals. He's someone who is, partly by upbringing and partly by conviction, pretty firm about this. So I was surprised to read in the paper that he came up with this idea. I think it's wrong. I think the whole point is that it's absurd. If you commit a particular crime, irrespective of whether you're stealing from Superdrug, Boots, or the shop round the corner, it should be the same penalty, whatever the nature of the shop that you're stealing from.
Let's go to Hannah, who's in Uxbridge. Hi, Hannah.
Hi, Ian. Hi, Michael. Good evening.
Hi, Hannah.
I would really just want to ask about the recent sexual exploitation findings that have been released. Do we have a problem with institutionalised prejudice? Why were these children not believed? Is it a problem that children from vulnerable backgrounds are systematically ignored?
In a nutshell, yes, they have been. You're absolutely right.
Why?
To put your finger on it.
Yeah.
Well, I've had the painful job of reading some of the serious case reviews into some of these dreadful examples of child sexual exploitation in my previous job as Education Secretary, when you've got some responsibility for some of these issues. And part of the problem was that girls who were often brought up in abusive or neglectful homes would sometimes be taken into care. Their mum couldn't cope, dad often wasn't there. These girls grew up in situations where the one thing that they didn't receive from anyone was love. They were then vulnerable to exploitative men who would shower them with affection and money and then alcohol and then drugs and then do the most horrendous things to them. Having groomed them, they would treat them in the most inhuman fashion. And one of the problems that we have had is that there were people in the police and elsewhere who thought that these girls, to use a very old-fashioned phrase, were no better than they ought to be. They thought these are the sorts of girls who would get drunk or indulge in risky behaviour or early sexual contact. And frankly, the attitude amongst the police was that these were people who were outside the bounds of respectability. That was a horrendous attitude. You had a situation where these girls were victims 3 times over when they were little girls and they didn't receive the security that they needed, when they were young teenagers and they didn't have the protection that they needed when they were in care, and then when they were in the hands of these men. The good thing about today's summit, what the Prime Minister, what Nicky Morgan have said, is that there's been absolute clarity now. That if you are the sort of person, whether you're a police officer, a teacher, a social worker, who willfully neglects these children, then you'll pay the price. The other good thing is that the quality of people working in social work over the last few years has really begun to improve thanks to some changes that have been made.
But isn't part of the problem that price hasn't been heavy enough in the past?
Yeah. Well, there are, you're right. There are some people now who have presided over the child protection in some of these local authorities who have lost their jobs. But it was also the case that there were individuals who would sometimes leave one local authority and pop up in another. And you did not have the proper accountability that you needed. There were some people who have lost their jobs in the past because things have gone catastrophically wrong in their local authority areas. But far too often, child sexual exploitation wasn't taken seriously enough.
What about mandatory reporting? Because the Prime Minister said today, well, if you're a social worker, if you're a police officer, or in one of these societal institutions, you have an obligation now to report it, and there'll be criminal sanctions if you don't.
Yes.
What about extending that much more widely?
Well, we are introducing mandatory reporting if a professional thinks that they have come across evidence of female genital mutilation, and we're consulting on how much more widely that should be extended. Some children's charities with child protection experience, like NSPCC and Bernardo's, have said there is a danger that people will indulge in sort of defensive practice, which means that they'll report everything and that you will move from one extreme to the other. And a lot of things which are reported are in fact either trivial or not real cases. There is a balance to be struck here, obviously, and I think the result of that consultation should result in the right policy that everyone involved in child protection recognises helps prime people so that they alert the appropriate authorities without going into overkill.
And when you look at the fact that we've had these scandals in Rochdale, in Bradford, in Oxfordshire and Luton and several other places, that makes me think that this is actually rife in many other areas of the country that we don't actually know about now. Now, that is obviously just a supposition based on the fact that we've got all of these areas now. Do you share that?
Alexis Jay, the professor who investigated what was going on in Rotherham, says yes. She's the expert. I trust her. Yes.
It's deeply worrying, isn't it? Because if that is the case, these cases haven't been uncovered formally.
Well, I'm sure it's the case that there are some parts of the country where child sexual exploitation has been going on, and we do not have the full picture yet. Absolutely. I should say that one of the people who is a hero in this is Andrew Norfolk, the Times investigative reporter who uncovered what was happening in Rotherham.
Who was ridiculed by social workers in Rotherham, we should remember.
Well, by councillors.
By councillors as well.
But he was he is a hero. And I think that Andrew had the connections as a dogged reporter to be able to uncover what's going on. I'm sure it must be the case that we can't know where, that elsewhere in the United Kingdom other things have been going on, and because there haven't been people like Andrew, these crimes haven't yet come to light.
OK, let's move on. Brian is in Cumbria. Hello, Brian.
Hello there, how are you? Okay.
Hi, very well. What would you like to ask?
Well, I'd just like to ask Michael that yesterday David Cameron said that he was going to reduce the price of houses, new build houses, I just don't remember exactly, by 20%. I'd just like to know how he's going to fund this and how people are going to still afford them, because it's not the top price of the house that seems to be the problem, it's people affording deposits and mortgages.
You're absolutely right about both of those things. I mean, the first thing to say is that what David has been talking about is extending the number of what have been called starter homes. And these are homes that will make available to people under the age of 40 so they can get onto the housing ladder.
Why under the age of 40? There are plenty of people in their 40s that would like to get onto the housing ladder.
Well, you've got to make sure that it's prioritised on one section of the population. It seems to us that the right thing to do is to help those people who traditionally would have been able to expect to get a home before they're 40, but haven't been. I remember, Ian, you're a similar age to me, when we were growing up, there was a situation comedy called Sorry, with
dreadful.
Yeah, with Rodney Corbett.
Ronnie Corbett, yeah.
And it was a comedy because you had a man in his 40s living with his parents. Well, that was a comedy then. It's a documentary now. We need to make sure that we have more homes for young people. The reason that we can make a saving here is that normally when homes are built, there are various bureaucratic costs that we pile on them, something called a Section 106 agreement that means that any house builder has to give some money to the local authority for the local authority to spend on whatever it considers appropriate. We're saying get that out of the way in these cases in order to allow more homes to be built.
Well, in order to give subsidies to people who, under 40 years, they're going to get 20%, and then when they sell them, they're going to recoup it. Surely that will have a knock-on effect further up the scale. And don't you remember what Margaret Thatcher used to say? You can't buck the market. If you fiddle with the housing market, beware of the consequences. Shouldn't we have learned from that by now?
Well, one of the things that Margaret Thatcher absolutely believed in was home ownership. That's why she had discounts for people who. That's why she had mortgage interest tax relief, appropriate then, not appropriate now. It's also why we've got the Help to Buy scheme, which does, as we've been discussing, help to deal with the whole difficulty in securing a deposit. Now, I think that we've got to make sure that the perfectly legitimate ambition that people have to own their own home can be satisfied. Ultimately, one of the ways in which we do that is, yes, by getting the banking and the lending system right, but it's also by getting rid of some of the bureaucracy, including planning rules, that prevent homes being built. One of the reasons why the price of homes has gone up disproportionately, why we've had house price inflation, is that the supply of new homes has been constricted.
Well, that is certainly true. I don't think anyone would argue with that. But whether it's right to skew the market in that way, I think people will debate for a long time. Half an hour to go with Michael Gove. 0345 6060 973. I'm Iain Dale at Drive. LBC News Time. It's 5:31. Simon Conway has the headlines.
The Prime Minister says he's determined to end the walk-on-by culture that too many police forces and authorities have shown towards child sexual abuse. He's announced plans to jail for up to 5 years senior public officials who fail to protect children. LBC can exclusively reveal that allegations of police corruption and negligence in the case of a murdered boy are to be investigated by the police watchdog. The father of Vishal Mehrotra believes the 8-year-old was abducted by members of a Westminster paedophile ring in London in 1981 and the police covered it up. Flowers have been left close to the house in Bristol where body parts were discovered in the search for missing teenager Becky Watts. Police have been given a further 24 hours to question 2 people on suspicion of the 16-year-old's murder. The Israeli Prime Minister has told the US Congress that the world must avoid Iran getting nuclear at all costs. Benjamin Netanyahu says he believes Tehran is a threat to the entire world. LBC weather largely dry with clear spells tonight for London and the southeast. A frost in places by dawn, lows of 3 Celsius. Showers continuing in parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, West England, but mostly dry elsewhere. Tomorrow, most places dry and sunny, feeling less cold, highs of 10 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Simon Conway.
LBC Travel Centre. The A13 in East London still has one of 3 lanes closed eastbound this afternoon, just after the Beckton roundabout. It's all after an accident that happened at around 1 this afternoon, and it's causing major problems for anyone heading east out of London tonight. The A13 and Barking Road from the Canning Town flyover slow. A12 from Bromley by Bow to Gants Hill. North Circular southbound from Charlie Brown's at the M11. In Wapping on the highway and along Upper Thames Street from the Blackfriars underpass, I can see traffic struggling. M25, that's queuing anti-clockwise from junction 15 at the M4 to 11 at Chertsey after an accident. And clockwise on the M25, you're slow between 22 at St Albans and 23 at the A1M after an accident that's now on the hard shoulder. On the southbound stretch of the M1 in Leicestershire, you're slow between 22 at Colville and 21A at Leicester North. That's because of a breakdown still blocking the inside lane of 3 on that stretch. Keeping you moving, your next travel update is in 15 minutes.
This is LBC.
Whether you're a butcher, baker, bar owner, jeweller, architect, mechanic, cat groomer, IT consultant, malt producer, tree chopper, bespoke dog, exotic fruit seller, onesie tailor or pig breeder, employers across the UK, however small the business, will soon have to provide a workplace pension, even if you employ just one person. It's the law. Act now and find out when this affects you. Search the Pensions Regulator. Workplace pensions. We're all in. The Pensions Regulator is empowered by the UK government to regulate workplace pensions.
Mum! Yes! There are penguins in my room! Nobody wants to wake up to a chilly home. So if your boiler breaks down, it's good to know that British Gas engineers are only a phone call away. And that 92% of our surveyed home care customers would recommend our services. To find out more, call 0800 009 4747 or search Home Care from British Gas. Conditions apply.
The power to switch energy supplier is in your hands. It's now easier than ever to switch and save. Many could save around £200, some even more.
I saved £170.
I saved £200.
We saved £230.
Millions have already switched. Don't miss out. Start today at beanenergyshopper.com. Brought to you by UK Government. £200 saving based on median household consumption for both gas and electricity. Details at gov.uk/switching evidence.
Remembering every phone number you've ever called is not impressive. What is impressive is remembering to call 118434 whenever you... 118434. It's the handy number for handy numbers.
Calls cost 76 pence plus £1.53 per minute from a BT landline. Other networks vary and mobiles cost considerably more.
Darling, what's wrong?
I missed a call. It was that big order. And when I called back, he'd already gone with another supplier.
Why didn't we have e-receptionist answering and directing our calls? Avoid the horror of the missed call from just 30p a day with e-receptionist. Visit ereceptionist.co.uk for your free 30-day trial.
Free trial must be cancelled within 30 days to avoid fees.
Employers across the UK, however small the business, will soon have to provide a workplace pension. It's the law. Act now. Search the Pensions Regulator. Workplace pensions. We're all in.
Iain Dale at Drive on LBC.
It's 24 minutes to 6 here on LBC. We have Michael Gove, the Chief Whip, with us. 0345 6060 973. If you'd like to ask him a question, you can text your question to 84850 and you can email ian@lbc.co.uk. Do you think we're in for the dirtiest election campaign in living memory?
No.
Why? Because most of us do.
Because I think that on the one hand, if you look back at some of the things that were said and done in past election campaigns, I think Nye Bevan once said that the Tories were lower than vermin. I think even at his most turbocharged, Ed Balls is not going to fling that accusation at us over the course of the next few weeks or months. Historically, you've had some pretty energetic political bruisers who've been throwing no-holds-barred punches. I think actually what we'll see during this election campaign will be, yes, a focus on the credentials of leading politicians. Prime Minister and alternative Prime Minister will be tested by journalists and by the public, and quite rightly so.
You will have seen these videos that Conservative Campaign Headquarters has been producing, mainly targeting Ed Miliband in a fairly vicious way. That's clearly going to be at the centre of the Conservative campaign. Trash Ed Miliband personally.
I don't think there's anything personal about them. I think they've just drawn attention to the fact that his policies and his positions would be harmful for Britain.
So you stand by all of the videos that you've seen so far. Have you seen them all?
Yes. I can't know that I've seen them all, but I've seen several. I'm assiduously checking all the time, and I think the point is that they make it clear what the consequences of voting Labour would be. But there's a myth that some people like to propagate, that it's somehow wrong to draw attention to the consequences of voting for your opponent, that that's somehow immoral. Elections are choices. And the second myth is that people say, oh, well, that means that the government's running a negative campaign. We've just been discussing the Prime Minister's policies on home ownership. That is a positive policy proposal, which I hope will transform the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. It's also been the case that if you look at some of the other things the Prime Minister's been talking about, from everything from helping to support people in retirement more effectively by protecting pensioner benefits, through to some of the changes that we're going to make to reduce taxes for hard-working people, to ensure that the jobs miracle carries on.
We ban all these phrases from this programme.
Okay, taxes for everyone, actually.
Okay, right, exactly. Right, let's move on. Zach he says he's in the Blackwall Tunnel. I hope he isn't, because we probably won't be able to hear him if he is. What's your question, Zach?
Hi, Ian and Michael.
Hi, Zach.
My question is, how concerned are you with this campaign cage and the fact that they're trying to justify the actions of Mohammed Amwadi?
Well, I think Boris was brilliant earlier today, wasn't he, when one of the Cage leadership...
Asim Qureshi.
Mr. Qureshi, public schoolboy, as I understand it, sort of tussled with the mayor, and the mayor quite rightly pointed out that Cage is not a human rights organisation. It's an organisation that peddles extremist propaganda. I thought what they said last week about Mohammed Emwazi was ridiculous. The idea that you should say...
Well, if they peddle extremist propaganda, why aren't they banned?
Well, is one thing to be, in my view, beyond the pale of civilised conversation. It's another to actually break the law. I think that the people with questions to answer are organisations like the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and Amnesty International that have cozied up to Cage. It's perfectly clear.
You are describing them as beyond the pale.
Well, I think that the sort of things that they've said are beyond what any civilised person would consider to be acceptable. As far as I can tell, they've been smart enough not to break the law. But if you've got a psychopathic killer who rejoices in broadcasting the fact that he's hacked to death innocent people, and you describe him as a gentle, lovely guy, then I'm sorry. You have passed beyond the pale of civilised conversation. Beyond that, there are a number of people in this country, because we're a civilised nation, that we allow to speak and we extend platforms to, and they abuse the privilege by defending the actions of people who hate this country, hate our civilization, hate freedom, hate our values.
How would you define the phrase hate preacher?
I think you know it when you see it, but it's someone who engages in rhetoric that sets one section of society against another, and in particular seeks to undermine the values which allow us to live in peace and harmony with one another.
Because you could also use that description for some politicians, so you could call them hate politicians, but we don't talk about banning them. It all comes back to freedom of speech, doesn't it?
Yes,
and
quite.
There is this argument raging now about who should be allowed to say what on university campuses, and again there seems to be a split within the cabinet on this. I hear my local MP Greg Clark, the universities minister, was slapped down by David Cameron in cabinet recently on this. Could you confirm that?
No. Firstly, I don't think I've ever seen the Prime Minister slap down anyone in Cabinet.
Apart from Vince Cable.
Oh, well, there might be the odd disagreement there. Secondly, I can never, I know it's a sort of terrible thing to say, but I can't really explain or go into detail about what goes on in Cabinet, because by definition they're confidential. But I can say that the Greg has been working, I know, with other ministers in order to make sure that we get the balance right. Freedom of speech matters. Universities are places where ideas are exchanged, and it is right that we should protect that. But it's also the case that there have been some universities, like the university that Mohammed Emwazi, Jihadi John, went to, the University of Westminster, that have had some people speaking who have been arguing for female genital mutilation, or who've said that the Jewish people are pigs, or and have used horrendous speech like that. I think we have to ask university administrators, I'm sorry, do you think it's entirely wise to extend a platform to these people, and in many cases to leave them unchallenged to peddle it? It is also the case that if you look at the Federation of Student Islamic Societies, that some of the people who've been involved in these Islamic societies on campuses have been people who have ended up justifying political stances that I don't think anyone of us would feel comfortable with.
The problem is, where do you draw the line, I suppose? Because we all say we want freedom of speech, but there has to be a limit beyond which people can go. Let's move on, because we want to get as many calls in as we can. David's in Croydon. Hello, David.
Yes, hi, Mr. Gove. Yeah, my questions regarding benefit sanctions and dispatches last night. The department or the benefits agency are now saying there's 49 separate inquiries into deaths directly related to punitive sanctions, including for about 40-odd suicides, one type of diabetic. Is it time to rethink this policy regarding these sanctions, given that sometimes people are sanctioned if they're 4 minutes late? And do you take any responsibility, your government, for these deaths, 49 deaths, many suicides? I'd just like to know your thoughts on that and what your concerns are regarding what these sanctions on some of the poorest, most vulnerable people in our society, Mr. Gove.
Just before you answer that, I don't know if you're aware of the comments that Nick Bowles, your ministerial colleague and good friend, has said today. He says there's an inhuman inflexibility to the way some welfare sanctions are applied. He says the sanctions do need to be looked at and thinks there should be changes after the election. He seems to be agreeing with David there.
Well, firstly, I on this occasion, I disagree with Nick. You're right, he's a good friend of mine. But I think that the approach that Iain Duncan Smith has taken to reforming welfare is right.
So I think it's not inhuman. I mean, that's a pretty provocative word to use, isn't it? Inhuman.
Yes. I don't think it was Nicholas's intention to provoke, and I think all of us can, from time to time, occasionally, as we reach for the right word in order to show that we don't necessarily approve or support every aspect of a particular policy, we can sometimes make a verbal slip. That's human.
I don't think it was that, though, because this is the full sentence. What he said. He says, with some of these cases, it seems to me there is an inhuman inflexibility that is imposed on them. The sanctions are a worry and do need to be looked at.
Yes, I disagree with that. I think that it's appropriate to ensure that we cannot have people who can rely on welfare being a way of life. We've got to make sure that there are appropriate incentives and sanctions to enable people to move off welfare onto work. There was a brilliant article that was written in the Daily Mirror a while back by Simon Danczuk, the Labour MP for Rochdale.
We just had him on.
Great man. And he made the point that no one ever achieves great things by being on welfare. People achieve great things through work. We've got to make sure that our culture rewards work rather than providing people with a lifetime of learned dependency. Now, to be fair to David, he's mentioned 49 individual cases of people who he says have taken their own life. Anyone who takes their own life, it's a tragedy. I don't know the details of those 49 cases. I don't know whether there were people who had mental health or other problems. I think each of them would merit investigation, but I can't see, and I think it's stretching it beyond the point of credibility, a link between the changes that Iain has made and the individual tragedies that he talks about.
OK, Michael, thank you. We've got, 14 more minutes to get your calls in. 0345 6060 973. Michael Gove's here with me until 6. This is LBC. It's 5:47. News headlines with Simon Conway.
David Cameron says children in the UK have suffered sexual abuse on an industrial scale, with authorities failing to act. Reporters found hundreds of girls may have been victims of a grooming gang in Oxfordshire. Detectives investigating the disappearance of teenager Becky Watts have been given an extra 24 hours to question 2 people on suspicion of murder. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has given a speech to the US Congress. He's warned that the world must avoid Iran getting nuclear weapons at all costs. This is LBC. Your travel news is next.
Hi, my name's Rob and I'm an engineer at Network Rail. I've got some important news for you if you're travelling by train this Easter. There'll be major disruption on some lines as we make vital improvements to the railway. So please, make sure you check before you travel at nationalrail.co.uk/Easter. You'll be able to find out about replacement buses, alternative routes and revised journey times. Thank you for your patience. Network Rail. A better railway for a better Britain.
I'm Amy Solomon in the LBC Travel Centre. In East London, major problems this evening. The A13 has one of 3 lanes still closed eastbound just after the Beckton roundabout. So it's because of an accident and it's causing problems really for anybody heading east on the A12, the A13, all surrounding roads through Poplar, Aldgate, Canning Town as well. And the North Circular, that's affected southbound from Charlie Brown's at the M11 all the way down. The A1M's looking very solid northbound in London from 4 at Hertford to 7 at Stevenage, heading away from London, I should say, with reports of an accident on that stretch. And southbound also seems to be affected by a problem at the moment. M25, that's queuing anti-clockwise from junction 15 at the M4 to 11 at Chertsey after an accident. Still, southbound on the M1 in Leicestershire, still slow from Colville to Leicester North. That's 22 to 21A, all after a breakdown, even though those lanes are now back open. Keeping you moving, your next travel update is in 15 minutes.
LBC Travel.
With GoToMeeting. Work smarter with a free 30-day trial.
Whether you're a butcher, baker, bar owner, jeweller, architect, mechanic, cat groomer, IT consultant, malt producer, tree chopper, bespoke dog suit maker, exotic fruit seller, onesie tailor or pig breeder, employers across the UK, however small the business, will soon have to provide a workplace pension, even if you employ just one person. It's the law. Act now and find out when this affects you. Search the Pensions Regulator. Workplace pensions. We're all in. The Pensions Regulator is empowered by the UK government to regulate workplace pensions.
When it comes to driving in Old Blighty, you do things a little differently. There's not miles of long straight roads over here, just roundabouts. Roads with barely enough room for a car, let alone a man in a van coming the other way. And of course, the speed bumps. Brilliant, isn't it? That's why the Volvo V40 R design was tuned and tested to tackle those wonderfully British roads. And from just $269 a month with Volvo car leasing, it's even been tuned for the British economy.
3-year personal contract hire agreement with initial rental of £807. Offer ends May 31st, subject to status, mileage and return conditions apply. Visit volvocars.co.uk for more details.
Book a test drive today at your nearest Volvo showroom. The Volvo V40 R design, made in Sweden, tuned for Britain.
Do you want to take your business to the next level? Make sure you never miss a sale again with iZettle card payments. All you need is an iZettle card reader with a tablet or smartphone loaded with their free app. There are no fixed fees or lengthy contracts, and if your business signs up today, you'll receive a free credit card reader. Big things start small, so to find out how iZettle card payments could help grow your business, visit iZettle.com. That's iZettle.com.
They say great drama stays with you. Well, join Sky TV Online today and you'll get a free Samsung Galaxy Tab 4. So you can watch the best drama from the UK and US on Sky Atlantic, wherever you are. Including Game of Thrones, Season 5. But hurry, this offer ends 5th of March. Just thought I'd add a bit more drama there so you wouldn't forget. Search Sky Bundles to join online today. Sky. Believe in better.
Sky TV from £21.50 per month. Direct debit subject to status. £10 standard setup. Upfront payment required. Sky Go requires 3G, 4G or Wi-Fi. UK and ROI only. Minimum contract and further terms apply.
To the wheelbarrow race winners and the Sunday League smashers, the chainsaw juggling champions and the sword scoffing masters, to the triathletes, the mathletes, to all of our fellow number ones, we say, boom! You did it. And so did we.
O2 has been ranked #1 network for customer service satisfaction by Ofcom for the 6th time in a row. O2. Be more dog.
Employers across the UK, however small the business, will soon have to provide a workplace pension. It's the law. Act now. Search the Pensions Regulator. Workplace pensions. We're all in.
Iain Dale at Drive on LBC.
8 minutes to 6. The government chief whip Michael Gove is with me. Now, Michael, it was 7 days ago that this happened to Natalie Bennett, the leader of the Green Party.
That's part of the whole costing.
Well, the cost of 500,000 homes. Let's start with that. How much is that going to be?
Right. Well, that's you got a total cost that will be spelt out in a manifesto.
So you don't know?
No,
you don't.
Now, let's compare that to the man you said you'd like to have back in your top team in government, a certain Mr. Johnson.
In Uxbridge,
right.
I'm proud to say.
Name a pub on the high street.
I'm quite right too. And anyway,
name a pub on the high street.
I'm thrilled to be.
Name any pub on the high street.
You go. I'll buy you a drink in Uxbridge if and when.
Which pub? Okay, I'll meet tomorrow.
If and when I'm elected, it would be invidious. It would be wrong and invidious of me to single out one pub. The argument that's been put to me is that we need to get away from TPIMS, which stands for...
I remember, do you?
Give me the thing again.
Well, you just mentioned it, I didn't.
Terrorism, prevention, something measure.
You've mentioned it, not me.
We need to get...
What do they for again?
We need to get away
from... You're well-educated,
I
only told you 20 minutes ago.
We need to get away from the TPIM, whatever it stands for, and get back to the...
Terrorism Prevention and Investigation Measure.
Thank you. Yeah. Wait a minute. If you got your Oyster card, I think it's gone up to £2.
Pardon? £2?
£2.10, is it? Oh, God, figures. A cash single is... it is currently, in zones 1 to 7, it is £6.70.
Single?
Can that be right?
I don't think that's right either.
Well, that's what it says here. Seems unbelievably expensive to me. That's outrageous.
Now, what's the difference there? Sexism? I mean, does Boris really sound like someone who can get to grips with a big government department? Or do you think it's all right as long as he's surrounded by good people? Natalie Bennett got trashed for that interview, and yet Boris does the same. People just sort of think it's normal.
She did get trashed, and I think some of it was unfair, actually. Funny enough, I used to work with Natalie.
Did you really?
We both worked at the Times at the same time. I was on the news desk, and she was a sub-editor, and very good journalist too. I think she herself said, anyone can have a bad day. And she had the flu, and her colleagues said actually she shouldn't have been doing interviews that day. She should have been in bed with Lemsip. And we've all had those days. Yes, you can say, oh, well, it was a policy launch and she should have known more about it. It was just one interview. The one thing I would say, however, about Boris is that if you're asking a question about Boris, he's been running the world's most successful city for the last 6 and a bit years.
Has he? Or isn't it people around him that really do the legwork? He's the front man.
No. I think there are two things to say. Firstly, being able to choose good people with whom to work and delegating effectively to them is a skill in itself.
Is that one you have?
I'm very lucky in that even now, while I'm here, that the Whip's office is running under the highly efficient and strategically brilliant leadership of my deputy, Greg Hands, Member of Parliament for Chelsea and Fulham. So I'm lucky.
I was maybe thinking of some of your advisors at the Department of Education.
Oh, yeah, no, well, they did a brilliant job as well.
Okay.
But being able to choose good people and delegate them to them, I was very lucky that I had Nick Gibb as a junior minister. I can run through them all. But the other thing I would say about Boris is that some of the, Nick Ferrari and he were teasing each other. What we were doing, one of the reasons why it's such great listening is that when Nick and Boris are talking, it is like one of the great double acts of our time.
Bit like ours.
Well, I'd like to think that they're Morecambe and Wise, and we're closer, I think, probably to being Mike and Bernie Winters.
As long as it's not Hinch and Brackett. Sol Campbell is rumoured to be standing for London Mayor. Would you welcome him doing that?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind if he threw his hat in the ring. I don't know him, though. My son, I think, would probably prefer Frank Lampard through his hat and thing. My son, I'm afraid, is a Chelsea fan. This is his pen. I personally, I was going to say, I personally, as a Queen's Park Rangers supporter, would love it if a QPR player were to throw their hat in the ring.
Sol
I'm not
Campbell,
sure how many of them would be qualified for the role.
He's never done anything in politics. To automatically think you can go and stand for one of the top jobs straight off, shouldn't he sort of earn his... I was going to say earn his spurs. Maybe that's not the right
not
expression.
the right... No. I think that you can also have a reverse prejudice. You can sometimes think that because people have been successful outside politics, that their talents cannot possibly translate into politics, let alone organisation. One thing I would say, Seb Coe, outstanding athlete, he also delivered the success that was the 2012 London Olympics. I don't think that just because someone is an outstanding athlete, we should automatically write them off when it comes to success in other realms.
You haven't heard that Sol's looking for a parliamentary seat at all?
He's ruled himself out of Kensington.
Right. OK, let's get a quick call from Mark in Dagenham. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. While the CBI and the stock market say the economy is well on the way to recovery, there's still a lot of people at the other end of the market who think otherwise. We've got many people who are on 0 hours contracts and part-time work who can only survive with benefits. We've even got people in full-time work who can only survive with benefits. If we were to go back to when I left school, everyone who had a full-time job could pay their way, could pay their rent, look after their family on their own, and now that no longer seems to be possible. We all need benefits to live. I wonder what we can do about that.
Well, I don't agree with exactly how you put it, but I think you put a fair point. I think that one of the things about the economic recovery, it's undeniable that our country is recovering from the terrible mess that we inherited in 2010. All the statistics and the experience of any of us looking at the economy reassure us of that point. But you do make a fair point. And we've got to make sure that everyone in every part of the country benefits from the economic recovery. And that's why we've been talking about some of the stuff that we've discussed in the past hour. Lowering, making sure that there are fewer and fewer people who pay income tax. Increasing the minimum wage. Making sure that it is easier for people to get on the housing ladder. Because I do think that you make a fair point. There are some people in our society who have been insulated from a bad economy because they're in the sorts of jobs and the sorts of organisations where they seem to sort of float above the rest of us.
And isn't your
and we do need to
problem
make sure that the economic recovery helps everyone.
Isn't your problem before the election is that the perception among many people, it may be Mark's perception, is that the Conservative Party stands for those people rather than the people that he's talking about, people who are effectively see themselves at the bottom of the pile and they want to get out, but they're not getting any help from the likes of you.
If that's the perception, then I would challenge it with the reality. And the reality is that when we've had the opportunity to make changes to income tax, we've taken more people at the bottom of the income spectrum out of income tax altogether. And when we've had money to spend on public services, we've spent it on, for example, £2.5 billion to help the very poorest children.
But you see, Mark will then say, I'm putting words into his mouth, sorry, Mark, but Mark might then retort, well, what about that black and white ball? All these 1,500 rich people paying £8,000 to go shopping with Theresa May. I dread to think what they pay to do anything with you, Michael. What impression does that give people like Mark?
I think that there's a distinction to be drawn here. I think if someone has taken risks, worked hard and been successful, we should celebrate that success. If someone has simply found themselves at the top of some organisation or other and they haven't risked, they haven't grafted, then they shouldn't have the phenomenal rewards that one or two people do get in those sorts of positions. And that's what we've got to get back to. The Conservative Party supports people who are going to create jobs for others. What it doesn't support is a culture of jobs for the boys.
And what was your auction price?
I can't remember.
I think it was dinner at home with the Goves.
That was the prize, yes.
Cooked by Mrs. Gove. I would pay for that.
Well, Iain, you can have it for free.
There we are. There's an invitation. Michael Gove, thank you very much. I hope we're going to see you again before the election. I'm sure we will.
I'd love to.
Thank you very much indeed. That's Michael Gove, the Government Chief Whip. This is LBC. It's 6 o'clock.
On FM, online, on your mobile and on digital radio. Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 6 o'clock, the Prime Minister has admitted children in Britain have suffered sexual abuse on an industrial scale. A review has found 370 children may have been victims of a grooming gang in Oxfordshire, with police and social workers missing opportunities to end the abuse. This girl was 12 when she started being abused by the gang. She's told LBC the police